And now? Okay, perfectly. So, good morning for everyone. I'm pretty happy to be here. And today I will talk about don't rewrite your framework. I will show some of the, at least considered by myself, my experiences, and a topic in Reddit that I created about the lesser Rails known features, okay? So, I came from Brazil, so 22 hours flying and 8 hours between airports and waiting. So yes, I thought the same thing. We need more Toy Story movies because just four for this time is. So, my name is Vinícius Alonso. I'm a senior software engineer working for Solids Technology. And don't be shy, get in touch. Here are my social medias and my email. And I have a blog too. In my blog, I post the same topics that here, but a little deeper. And the last post was the past year, but I will post more things frequently after I back home. So this talk history started. I was working with some co-workings, reviewing pull requests. I am the annoying guy of the pull requests in the company. And between this job, I was reviewing and I checked out that my coworkers was like rewriting things that existing in Rails. So in general, I saw some things and I just put a link and the people, oh, okay, it is existing in Rails. I was trying to implement exactly this. Then I created this topic in Reddit and people started to respond. And based in this response, and in my studies in api.rubyonrails.org, I created this talk. So I will show some troubles that in general people don't know that Rails resolves it. First, validate different fields in different scenarios. In some situations, we need don't just validate all the fields at the same time, but validate different things like in multi-step validations. Rails provide us context validations. Let's imagine the following scenario when we have, for example, a customer class. Okay, let's imagine an e-commerce. And this customer class has a name, an email, a password, and two address fields. But we would like to validate the address fields in a different moment than the other fields. And with Rails, we have the own word that is able to specify the context. So in this case, we have the first line with the name, email, and the password, and the second line validated on account finish. Okay, so in the first line, we will validate it on create, and in the second line, we will validate just in this custom context. One moment. Okay, now it's better. Can everyone hear me? Okay, perfectly. So here we will instance a new customer and pass these three fields. And okay, if I call the valid method, that is valid perfectly. But when I switch the context to account finish in both in valid and save, this is not a valid. But when we fill those fields, we have a valid object. This is very interesting for multi-step validation or to validate different fields in different scenarios. Other thing is treat data as a single unit. Maybe this is not the best phrase to describe this, but this is very cool. We have aggregations in Rails. So check it out our class again. We have an address field, two address fields, okay? But we can use those fields to compose a new object. And this has a name. This is called value object. A value object is when I have two data, for example, that has no an entity by themselves. Let me check an example. For example, everyone here probably used the JMoney, right? In JMoney, we have two fields, an amount and the kind of currency. For example, dollar, baht, and 1, 2, 3. With those two fields, we have the money, and the money has his own behavior. And we will implement the same thing here. We implemented a class called addresses to specify the own behaviors of our addresses. We create a simple class in Ruby, and we add a method equal to compare our address with other addresses. To implement it in Rails, we have the method composed of. We will specify the addresses and map our customer classes fields with the new class fields. And now we are able to use like this. We instance a new customer, pass the addresses, and now when I call customer.address, I have a new object, and this object is from the class address. We are able to create an address directly using the class and pass to the customer like this. We are able to use the methods from the class, like this comparison, that's called the method equal, defined previous. And we can use it in filters in Active Record too, like this. And side effect is when relationship changes. This is not exactly to hide, but some people don't know about this. And it is interesting. It's called association callbacks. And basically, let's check it out an example like this. We have a cart, like a shopping cart, with has many items. And let's imagine that we want to calculate the total price for this cart. We will iterate it over all total price of items and send them. And then we updated the total value of the cart. Okay, this is one approach. There is any trouble with this. But we can do our class respond for side effects like this. So in has many, we can use those two words, after add and after remove. And we can pass two methods to them. So now when I add a new item, I will increment, and when I remove, I will decrement the total price. So before, I had a code like this. A cart, I assign a new item, and then update the total price. But now I have a maybe more fluent, where I will say, okay, I have a new item, and I just need to save in the database, because we are just changing in memory. Process large data set. This is other thing that, in general, some people forget how to handle or don't know. But in Rails, we have a very interesting way to do it called batch. For example, let's imagine that we have a report that will be processed in a background job every day at midnight. And we've loaded all the customers and run this report for each one. Here, we have two troubles looking at this code. The first, we are doing a full table scan because we are using .all. And the second is all customers are being loaded in memory at the same time. If see we have one customer, two customers, maybe 100, it should not be a problem. But when we have a lot of and a lot of, it will be a problem in memory. So in Rails, we have a method called findIt, and now we will iterate it over each customer, but just a one at a time. So load one customer, load the two, not loading all the in memory at the same time. And there are different ways to do it, handle like an enumerator and using groups, using find embeds. So now we will have batch, and every batch is a group of customers, and we can handle like an enumerator and run the report process for each one. Sorry. By default, the batch size is 1,000, but here we can change it for example, 100, and we can do more interesting things using an approach like that. For example, let's split 200 customers into 2 workers. You can, for example, start getting a list of IDs. And in the worker 1, we will say, okay, finding bats, but finish by the end of the list, because we split the list into 2. And in the worker 2, we say, hey, start by the second half of the list. So the first worker will run from the first customer by the half of the list, and the second will start in the second half by the end. And we can run at the same time like this. But talking about it, we remember that concurrent code sometimes bring troubles. And the Rails give us some ways to avoid it. We have 2 interesting approaches, like optimist locking. So in optimist locking, we basically add a new field called the lock version in our database. And then we will have a scenario like this. So in the image number 1, we have 2 variables getting the same record in the database. And in the image 2, the first variable will try to update, and that's okay. But we have a lock version, and the lock version will say what is the more recent version of our record in the database. So in the figure 1, it's 1, okay. But in figure 2, after the update, we have the number 2, because after the update the address, city, we updated the database lock version 2. And when the second variable try to update, is not will be possible, because the lock version in memory will be different from the lock version in the database. So to fix it, the second variable needed to reload the code and then update. With this approach, we can avoid those concurrent trouble. And this is the optimist locking, because it says, okay, let it crash. If it crashes, I raise a trouble here and you fix. But we have another approach to the same trouble called pessimist locking. Pessimist locking is quite different, because we have a code like this, customer.lock, and we find our record. And it will generate an SQL, quite similar with any SQL, but with a little difference. For update, we are locking our row in the database for update, and just one will be able to run to update at time. Let's imagine this example where we have 2 processes, and in the process 1, we will lock, sleeps for 10 seconds, and then update. And in the process 2, we'll do the same thing without sleeping, okay? One important thing, to it work, we need to be inside a transaction. So basically, the first process will get the database row, will sleep for 10 seconds, and the second process will try ready, but will not be possible. He will need to wait these 10 seconds, and after the process 1 update the database and make the row free, the second one will be able to ready and update. Standard attribute values. I believe that Rails 7.1 introduced this cool feature called normalize. And before it, sometimes we find code like that, where we have a before save with sanitize fields, removing the phone masks, and all case emails, for example. And now we have this beautiful way to do the same thing. We just pass normalizers, fields name, with, and lambda expression. We are able to use it, for example, to create a new user in this example that it will normalize before save. We can use it in filters like that. In the second line, it will be skipped, but in the first line, it will work it, normalize it. And you have the method normalize value for that is very good to write specs and the tests in our spec. Composing reusable carries in database is other cool thing, and we have a lot of cool things in Active Record, but I chose one specific carry method to check it out today, is .extending. The .extending, it's cool because we are able to share some behaviors and some filters between different classes. For example, here we create a simple module called filter by role, and we have two methods, two filters in this case, only admin and only manager. We are able to call .extending and pass this module and share this behavior between different classes. This is interesting because we have a gens like, for example, will paginate that do exactly this. This is a simple example of how we can implement a pagination. And observing application behavior is other important thing because we have a default way in Rails to instrument and to understand our application behaviors. So here we have a simple method in a controller. And we can use the active record support notifications dot instrument, pass a name and some extra information. And we are able to subscribe. And subscribing here, we get some cool informations about our endpoint every time that it runs. So in this case, we subscribe in contacts, and we have the name, duration, and the payload. This is very cool because this is a custom example, of course, but Rails provide us a lot of default. We have a lot of hooks in Rails for almost everything. SQL, call in controllers, for example. And we are able to get a lot of informations in our application health. Gens like AppSignal work like this. And there is this cool thing that I like, that we are able to write intention revealing code logic using, for example, string inquire. Everyone should have seen this code And what happens here? Behind the wood, we have this class, active support, inquiry, string inquiry, dot new, and we pass the production string. And we are able to call dot production, dot test, and any one thing we want. But just production will return true. We have custom callbacks too, because active support has a callbacks module that is very interesting to implement some custom callbacks in other places of the code. In this example, we create a custom callback in application record, okay? And we call it in a customer class. So when we active our customer, we will send an email. This is not a better example because there are better ways to do it in Rails, but the idea is that we are able to install active support gen and use it outside Rails in other projects. This is very cool. We can share data between layers inside the request using something like current attributes. So I believe that a good example of current attributes is Rails 8 authentication class current. So here we have our class that extends active support to current attributes with 2 virtual attributes. And we are able to use it during a request in different places, layers of the code. Like this, we can use in the controller, in the views, etc. And naming transformations across the framework are very interesting because we have the class inflector, and we are able to do things like this. For example, here we have an example with a namespace API, a root home, and a simple controller. But there is one trick here. Our module API is like an acronym. And if we try to do something like that, the code will break because this is not the default behavior of the Rails. But we can change it. In config initializer inflections, you can specify that API is an acronym. And the Rails will handle like that. But this class has more and more cool things to handle text and name conventions. For example, singularize, pluralize, and etc. Because it's common sometimes find code to help people creating custom helper to handle it, but Rails has a lot of default things in this case. Composing large route files, we have a method called draw in Rails routes. So let's imagine that this is a big route file, okay? And we have some namespaces like admin and like manager. If we have a big route file, it's hard to find where I should change or add a route. And we can split it into smaller ones. Like in this example, I created 2 new files, config routes admin and config routes manager.rb. And in our main routes file, I can just call draw and pass the name, like a symbol. We have a custom routes too. We are able to create some interesting routes with direct routes, like this example. So we have directly docs, and we pass a route like a string that could be used, for example, in API documentation. And we have this landing that has a subdomain. So we are able to create some custom routes inside Rails like this. And with this, we can use docs_URL And this is perfect because it's better than just copy this string and put it directly in link 2, for example. And conclusion, the documentation is your best friend. So read the docs, read the source code. It's a great way to learn in Rails. And everything in programs involve trade-offs. Make smart choices. For example, some people don't like side effects, and that's okay. If it works for your project, okay. If it doesn't, okay. And in this talk, there are a lot of uncovered features because there are many things that people don't know about Rails. And thank you very much.